Ramiah Griffin's sister tells us that suspect Adeline Atongwa actually attended Ramiah's funeral and in her view has been trying to garner sympathy for others. Ramiah's sister Mariah says that she now sees this as all some sort of cover.
I felt angry because, like I said, you knew what you did, and for you to reach out, it's like, what are you trying to cover? You thought that you were going to get away with killing my sister?
A young mother, a quiet suburban neighborhood, and a funeral guest hiding a deadly secret. When 20-year-old Ramiah Remy Griffin was found shot to death in her Baldwin Borough home, Pennsylvania police knew this wasn't a random act of violence. No break-in, no robbery, no mystery intruder in the night. This was personal. But what shocked the community most wasn't just who was charged with her murder. It was where he showed up next. A trusted presence, sitting quietly among the grieving, all while knowing the truth. This is the story of how a life full of promise ended behind a closed door. How love turned to fear. And how the warning signs were there all along. What will make a man commit such murder and still pretend to mourn at her funeral? But before we dive to what happened to Ramiah Remy Griffin, welcome to My City Crime Tales. On this channel, we cover cases that matter, stories that don't just shock us but teach us. Lessons about love, control, hidden abuse, and the silent battles so many are facing right now. By subscribing, you're not just following another true crime story, you're helping bring awareness that could save lives. So now let's dive into what would make a man commit such cruel murder. Before the crime scene tape. Before the investigation. Before her name became a headline. There was Remy. Ramiah Griffin, though everyone called her Remy, was just 20 years old. She was a young woman with so much life ahead of her, a bright future that seemed untouchable. She grew up in Pennsylvania, surrounded by a tight-knit family who adored her. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. To those who knew her, she was more than just a name. She was light. She was joy. The kind of person who made everything feel a little brighter just by being around. Friends say she had that rare kind of energy, warm, inviting, impossible to ignore. People gravitated toward her without even trying. She wasn't chasing fame or fortune. Remy lived her life in a way that felt real and authentic. She shared her everyday moments with the world. Funny little videos, honest captions, candid photos, offering a glimpse into her life that felt familiar and relatable, just like so many young women do in this digital age. In 2022, everything changed. At the age of 19, Remy became a mother. And like everything else she did in her life, she embraced motherhood with all of her heart. She took on the late nights, the sacrifices, the moments of self-doubt, and the quiet strength it takes to raise a child, all while trying to build a future for herself. Her love for that baby was undeniable. It became her world, her anchor, the reason she kept going even when things got tough. Every step she took, every decision she made was for that child. And in her eyes, there was no greater purpose. Baldwin Borough isn't the kind of place you expect stories like this to happen. It's a quiet town, a place where the biggest worries are the things we all take for granted. But tragedy doesn't always arrive from far away. Sometimes, it sneaks in when you least expect it. In Remy's story, the danger didn't come from the shadows. It wasn't some stranger lurking in the distance. It came from someone she knew. Someone inside her world. Someone she trusted. Have you ever looked at a photo, one that seemed happy on the surface, and wondered what was really going on behind the smile? Maybe we'll never know all the answers. But the truth is, sometimes it's not the big moments that define us. It's the quiet ones, the ones we never see coming, that change everything. Let me know what you think in the comments below. In her late teens, Remy began a relationship with a man named Adeline Itangwa, 22 years old, who is from Monroeville, just a short drive from Baldwin Borough. Like many young couples, their story started with hope. Two people at the beginning of adulthood, drawn together by a mix of affection, possibility, and soon responsibility. At first, it was everything that love is supposed to be. A connection forged by shared dreams and a future full of promise. But love is complicated. And sometimes, it unfolds in ways we don't expect. They shared a child together. A beautiful baby who would become the center of both their lives. And eventually, the heart of their conflict. In the beginning, that child was the one thing they both knew they could agree on. They both adored their little one, and for a while, it seemed like that love would be enough to keep their world together. But as time passed, what had been a symbol of their love soon became a symbol of their tension. At first, everything looked perfect, at least from the outside. Friends remember sweet posts, shared pictures, proud captions. The little family smiling for the camera, like a promise being written in real time. Their moments seemed filled with joy. It was the kind of story that felt like it would end in a happy ever after. But as months passed, something shifted. What had once felt tender began to feel different. Subtle changes at first. A tone in a conversation. A look. A boundary quietly moved. It wasn't obvious right away. No one could point to a single moment, a single event, and say, that's when it began. It was a slow shift, a small crack in the foundation that no one really noticed until it was too late. These are the moments that rarely make it into photos. But they matter. They are the moments that shape the truth behind the smile. The ones that quietly build up, unnoticed by the outside world, but felt deeply by those caught in the struggle. Experts on domestic abuse often describe a familiar pattern. It starts with what's called love bombing, intense affection early on, constant texting, overwhelming attention. It can feel flattering, even magical. But then, slowly, control begins to seep in. Questions become demands. Affection turns conditional. Social circles shrink. Isolation follows. And by the time the red flags become clear, the situation can already be deeply tangled, especially when a child is involved. In many ways, love can begin to feel like ownership. And that subtle shift is something that can be hard to identify until it's far too late. Not every relationship that starts with intensity ends this way, but for many victims, this gradual shift is the first step in a dangerous escalation they don't always see coming. What was once passionate becomes possessive, and what once felt like love becomes something else entirely. Remy and Adeline's relationship began to change after their baby was born. What had been romantic started to feel complicated. The early days of their romance, with late-night talks and laughter, gave way to silent stares and misunderstood words. They weren't fully together anymore, but they weren't entirely apart either. Like many young parents, they found themselves tied to each other through late-night calls, shared responsibilities, and emotional history. They were bound together by more than just a child. But the balance wasn't equal. Tensions grew. Arguments surfaced. And slowly a sense of unease settled in. A quiet discomfort that they couldn't shake, but couldn't quite name either. Friends noticed changes. Small comments. Shifts in her tone. But nothing that screamed danger, not yet. To many it looked like a young couple trying and struggling to figure out co-parenting. The early struggles of two people who were still figuring out how to build their own separate lives while raising a child together. Behind closed doors, though, the dynamics were straining. They were moving further away from the people they once were, and further into a new territory that neither of them seemed prepared for. This period, the months leading up to February 2024, would set the stage for everything that followed. Arguments grew sharper. Trust began to erode. What started as tension turned into something heavier, harder to ignore. They were no longer just navigating their relationship. They were navigating a battlefield where the stakes were their own well-being and the well-being of their child. And then came February 9th, 2024. A day that would shatter everything. A day when everything, the arguments, the tension, the growing sense of unease, would culminate in a way no one could have ever imagined. Looking back, it's often in these in-between moments, when a relationship shifts from light to shadow, that the most crucial warning signs appear. These moments don't come with flashing red lights. They don't demand immediate attention. But looking back, they were there. Quiet and still, tucked in the shadows of what seemed like normalcy. Have you ever sensed something was changing in a relationship long before anyone else noticed? Have you ever felt that shift, that quiet change in the space between what's said and what's left unsaid? Sometimes we can feel it before the world does. Let me know what you think in the comments below. It's late afternoon. A quiet street in Baldwin Borough. Outside nothing looks unusual. A few cars and driveways. Curtains drawn. But inside one of these apartments, something terrible has happened. Police officers are dispatched to conduct a welfare check at a unit on Young Ridge Drive. A friend hadn't heard from Remy in hours. Calls were going unanswered. Messages left on read. It was unusual, because Remy was known to stay in touch. At first, officers expect a routine check. Maybe she stepped out. Maybe her phone died. Maybe everything's fine. What they find inside will change everything. Inside the apartment, officers make a devastating discovery. Remy Griffin is found with multiple gunshot wounds. She's pronounced dead at the scene. Her 1-year-old child is discovered in a nearby room, alone, frightened, but miraculously unharmed. The contrast is almost unbearable. A young mother's life brutally taken, while her baby waits just steps away. Almost immediately, detectives can tell this wasn't a random break-in. No signs of forced entry. Nothing missing. No smashed locks. No chaos except for the violence that ended her life. Whoever entered that apartment either didn't need to break in or wasn't a stranger. The crime scene is methodically processed. Shell casings are collected. Surveillance canvases begin. Officers fan out through the neighborhood, knocking on doors, checking for security footage. They retrace her last movements. Every call. Every text. Every visitor that day. And soon, a timeline begins to take shape. For detectives, one fact becomes clear. Whoever pulled the trigger was close enough to Remy to get inside without resistance. Someone she either let in, or couldn't stop. And the timeline they're about to uncover will lead them straight to someone very familiar. This is the point in the investigation where everything starts to tighten. What began as a welfare check on a quiet February afternoon is about to unravel into a web of surveillance clips, witness statements, and chilling realizations. The officers don't know it yet, but they're standing in the middle of a crime scene that will shock the community, not because of the brutality alone, but because of who is connected to it. When you hear stories like this, peaceful neighborhoods shattered in a single afternoon, it's easy to think you'd notice the signs, or that something like this could never happen close to home. But would you? Have you ever walked past a quiet building, never realizing the unimaginable had just happened inside? Let me know what you think in the comments below. As the sun set on Baldwin Borough, a team of detectives gathered to piece together the final hours of Remy Griffin's life. The scene on Young Ridge Drive was quiet now, the flashing lights fading, the yellow tape swaying in the cold night air. But inside the police station, the real work was just beginning. Every homicide investigation starts the same way: build the timeline, find the witnesses, follow the evidence. But this case moved fast. Detectives began by reconstructing Remy's last known movements. They combed through phone records, text messages, social media activity, anything that could offer a clue. The last outgoing text from her phone was sent earlier that afternoon. After that, silence. No replies. No updates. Nothing. They spoke to the friend who called for the welfare check. She told them she'd grown worried when Remy didn't respond to multiple calls. Something that was very unlike her. That friend's concern is what sent police to Young Ridge Drive. Next, detectives started building what they call a movement map, tracing who might have visited the building that day, who entered, who left, and when. And that meant one thing: surveillance footage. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, collecting every piece of video they could find: doorbell cams, nearby businesses, building entrances. Hours of footage. Dozens of angles. A digital puzzle. Around the time detectives believe the shooting happened, a vehicle is spotted entering the area. It doesn't belong to Remy. It's unfamiliar. But there's something strange. The license plate doesn't match the car. It's stolen. The surveillance work didn't stop there. Detectives pulled nearby traffic camera footage, city-operated surveillance, even private business recordings. Bit by bit, they traced the vehicle's movements, where it came from, where it went, how long it stayed. What they found was chilling. The vehicle didn't linger. It pulled in, stayed for a brief but critical window, then drove off. And when they followed that trail, it led them straight to Monroeville. There, detectives identified Adeline Itangwa, 22 years old, as the person connected to both the vehicle and Remy's life. He wasn't just a casual acquaintance. He was the father of her child. Investigators moved carefully. They needed more than suspicion. They needed probable cause. They collected witness statements. People who saw a man arriving near the building that day. People who recognized the car. One neighbor remembered a distinct sound, a car door slamming and footsteps echoing in the hallway, just before everything went quiet. Phone data was subpoenaed. Records placed Adeline's phone in the area at the critical time. Surveillance, vehicle evidence, witness testimony, phone data, a net was tightening. And while all this was unfolding, one haunting detail lingered in the background. After Remy's death, before his arrest, Adeline attended her funeral. But detectives didn't know that part yet. For now, they were focused on turning their growing suspicion into a solid case. On February 21, 2024, nearly 2 weeks after the murder, Adeline Itangwa was arrested and charged with criminal homicide and endangering the welfare of a child. He was booked into the Allegheny County Jail, awaiting arraignment. The community that once saw him as part of Remy's world, now saw him in a very different light. It's hard to imagine what it must have felt like for investigators in those moments, to realize the trail led not to a stranger, but to someone woven into the victim's life. Have you ever watched a story unfold where the answer turned out to be closer than anyone wanted to believe? Let me know what you think in the comments below. 2 weeks after the murder, the people who loved Remy Griffin gathered to say goodbye. The investigation was underway, but that day wasn't about evidence or timelines. It was about grief, about family, about a young life cut short. It was cold. Rain fell in a light, steady drizzle, the kind that soaks into everything. Friends held each other close. Family members leaned on one another for strength. Inside, the air was heavy, thick with the sound of quiet sobbing and whispered prayers. Funerals have a strange way of freezing time. For a few hours, the world stops. Every memory, every shared moment, every what if hangs in the air. This was Remy's day. A moment to honor her. To remember the young woman who brought light to everyone around her. But among the mourners was someone no one expected. Someone who, in just a matter of days, would be charged with Remy's murder. Adeline Itangwa was there. According to Remy's sister, he arrived quietly. No scene. No words. He sat toward the back, away from the family. He didn't speak. He didn't cry. He didn't explain. He was simply there. For the family already drowning in grief,
I felt angry because, like I said, you knew what you did, and for you to reach out, it's like, what are you trying to cover? You thought that you were going to get away with killing my sister?
Mariah Griffin says her sister Remy and Adeline Atongwa were together about 4 years. In this picture, the two expecting parents were all smiles. Sometime after their daughter was born, they separated, yet maintained what Mariah thought was a civil relationship in the spirit of co-parenting.
What happens behind closed doors really don't get spoke of much, but there were some things that I've heard, and it kind of raised an eyebrow.
Mariah described Atongwa as a shady person and controlling, but she respected the fact that her sister still had love for him. And the night she found out Remy had been killed, Mariah said Atongwa needed to know as soon as possible.
He was sounding normal, so in my head, I'm like, he doesn't know what happened. So I didn't want to be the one to tell him what happened. Looking back, it's like he knew what happened.
The news of Atongwa's arrest reached Mariah today as she and her mom were on their way to a custody hearing for Remy's daughter. Now Mariah's even more determined to ensure her niece is placed in the right home, one that is a reflection of the love Remy embodied.
She was the one you would call when you needed help, when you needed a shoulder to cry on. She was the one. We have part of our justice, but we didn't get all of it yet.
The 22-year-old Atongwa is in the Allegheny County Jail tonight pending preliminary arraignment. In addition to being charged with criminal homicide, he's also charged with endangering the welfare of a child.
When you hear about someone attending a funeral after allegedly committing the crime, it raises unsettling questions about human behavior, about guilt, about performance, about how close evil can sit without being noticed. How would you have felt sitting in that room not knowing? Let me know what you think in the comments below. 4 weeks, the investigation into the murder of Remy Griffin had been building toward a single moment. Detectives had the evidence, the timeline, the surveillance, the phone data. And on February 21, 2024, everything came to a head. The suspect, Adeline Itangwa, 22, was arrested and charged with criminal homicide and endangering the welfare of a child. The man who once stood at Remy's side, the father of her child, now stood accused of taking her life. The arrest moment. The arrest happened quietly. No chase. No standoff. Just a knock and a pair of handcuffs. Investigators escorted him to the Allegheny County Jail. Behind the scenes, prosecutors prepared the charges. And the community that once saw him as part of Remy's world watched in disbelief. The case sent shockwaves through Baldwin Borough. This wasn't a stranger. This wasn't random. It was someone who had shared Remy's life, her home, her child. In the days following the arrest, Remy's family and friends gathered to remember her, not just as a victim but as a daughter, a friend, and a mother. Vigils were held. Balloons released into the night sky. Messages written on poster boards and hearts. For the community, the arrest brought a mix of emotions. Relief that a suspect was in custody, but heartbreak over what they had lost. A young mother. A future stolen. A child left without their mom. As of now, Adeline Itangwa faces charges of criminal homicide and child endangerment. The case is moving through the Allegheny County court system. At the time of this recording, no final conviction has been issued. Legal proceedings take time, months, sometimes years, especially in homicide cases. If convicted, he faces life in prison. If not, the trial will determine his fate. Either way, Remy's family faces a legal process that will force them to relive their pain again and again, in courtrooms and hearings. Amid the legal battles, the investigations, and the headlines, there's something more important. Ramia Griffin's life. She was just 20 years old. She loved her baby fiercely. She brought light into her friends' lives. She had plans, dreams, a future. And while her story ended far too soon, it continues to ripple through the lives she touched. Her family continues to raise awareness about domestic violence. They speak her name. They remember her not for the way she died, but for the way she lived. Stories like Remy's are hard to hear, but they're important. Because behind every statistic is a human being. A family. A child. A future that deserved more time. When you look back on this case, the warning signs, the investigation, the shocking moments, it's impossible not to ask hard questions about love, control, and the systems that should protect people before it's too late. What do you think justice should look like in cases like this? Let me know in the comments below. If you found Ramia Griffin's story inspiring, heartbreaking, or important to share, please send this video to your friends and family. You never know who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications so you don't miss the next case we cover. These stories matter. Your support helps keep them alive. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next video.